A small diner in Los Angeles on an October evening, its warm golden lights reflected off the crowded tables. The soft murmur of conversations and the gentle clatter of dishes created a cozy atmosphere. But then, all sounds abruptly stopped when a cold, sharp voice cut through the room, drawing every eye toward a corner. "We don't serve people like you here," the young waiter Trevor sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. His eyes were filled with contempt as he pointed at an older man sitting in a wheelchair, accompanied by a loyal service dog. That man was John Harris, a veteran whose weary eyes carried the weight of war and loss. His worn military jacket, the calloused hands gripping the armrests of his wheelchair, and the calm, watchful presence of his dog, Max, painted a picture of a life marked by struggle and resilience. John didn't yell or show anger. Instead, he looked up at Trevor with eyes full of hurt, his voice trembling. "I fought for this country. I just want a warm meal. Why would you treat me this way?" But Trevor remained unmoved. He crossed his arms, smirking with derision. "Rules are rules. No dogs allowed, no exceptions. Take it somewhere else." The atmosphere in the diner turned suffocating. Chairs creaked softly as patrons shifted uncomfortably. Conversations halted mid-sentence, but no one dared to intervene. They avoided John's pleading gaze, their silence harsh and heavy. It was a cruel, chilling quiet that blanketed the room. In a shadowed corner of the diner, a man with slightly disheveled dark hair and a simple hoodie silently placed his fork down. It was Keanu Reeves. He had come here seeking a moment of peace after a long day of filming. But now, his contemplative expression was gone, replaced by an intense, steely gaze. Keanu stood, each step deliberate and commanding, as he walked toward Trevor. His voice, deep and steady, sliced through the stifling tension like a blade. "Do you even know who you're talking to?" Trevor froze, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. Keanu didn't stop there. He turned his sharp gaze toward the silent diners, his tone firm and unyielding. "Are you all just going to sit there and let this happen? This man gave everything so you could have the lives you enjoy today. And this is how you repay him?" The room fell silent, but the weight of shame began to settle. Patrons who had avoided John's eyes now looked his way, their expressions heavy with guilt. No one spoke, but their discomfort was palpable. Suddenly, the diner door flew open, letting in a gust of cold wind that felt like a knife cutting through the suffocating silence. A man stepped in, his posture unsteady, his hands trembling. His face was hidden beneath a black mask, but his eyes, barely visible, radiated fear and despair. In his shaking hands, he clutched a gun. His hoarse voice broke the stunned silence. "Nobody move!" The room froze in collective shock, fear spreading like wildfire. The cozy diner, moments ago a stage for a quiet act of injustice, had become the epicenter of a far more dangerous drama. Everyone in the diner froze, as if turned to stone. Rapid, shallow breaths filled the air, and frightened eyes darted toward the masked man. No one dared to move. The once warm and cozy diner had transformed into a suffocating sealed box filled with dread and fear. The man raised his gun high, his voice breaking like a long-suppressed sob. "I don't want to hurt anyone. I just need to feed my family. My kids are starving. I have no other choice." His words carried not just desperation, but the crushing weight of a man overwhelmed by life's burdens. His hands trembled so violently that even the gun he held seemed unsteady. In the midst of the tense room, John Harris gently tightened his grip on the armrests of his wheelchair. His eyes locked onto the man with a calm intensity. Beside him, Max, his loyal service dog, growled softly, sensing the looming danger. Keanu Reeves, standing nearby, remained unusually calm. Slowly, he raised his hands in a gesture of peace, taking a careful step toward the man. "You don't have to do this," Keanu said, his voice steady yet gentle, like an autumn breeze soothing a burning fire. His words carried a quiet strength that cut through the fear in the room. "Let me help you. But first, please, put the gun down." The man snapped his head toward Keanu, his eyes filled with suspicion. He shouted, his voice hoarse, as though choked by his despair. "You don't understand. I've lost everything. My job, my home. Even my wife left me. My daughter looks at me like I'm a stranger. I'm nothing anymore." Those words, sharp and raw, sliced through the silent tension. Everyone in the diner could feel the depth of his anguish. There's nothing more dangerous or heartbreaking than a man who has lost all hope. Keanu took another step closer, his eyes reflecting nothing but genuine empathy. His voice softened, almost a whisper, but it carried a weight that made the room fall completely silent. "I may not know exactly what you're going through, but I know how loneliness and loss can drown a person. There's another way out of this. Trust me, we'll figure it out together." The man took a hesitant step back, his grip on the gun still shaky. His gaze flickered between the abyss of despair and a faint, flickering light of hope. It was then that John Harris spoke. His voice, rough and weathered by years of hardship, carried the gravitas of a man who had seen life at its worst. "Listen to me, son. I've lost everything too. War took my legs, my family, and even my daughter. But this," John's voice cracked with emotion, "this is not the way. Don't let the pain consume you. I promise, we'll help you." The masked man froze, his breaths coming fast and shallow. His eyes softened, the sharp edges of his desperation dulling slightly. The entire diner remained silent, as if collectively holding its breath, silently praying that this man might find his way back from the brink. Finally, his voice broke the silence, trembling with raw vulnerability. You lost your daughter too?" His question hung in the air, heavy and piercing, striking a chord deep within everyone in the room. The weight of his words shifted something unspoken, something shared between him and the veteran before him. John Harris, the elderly man whose eyes had witnessed a lifetime of pain, leaned forward slightly. His calloused hands, trembling with age and emotion, reached for the small pouch hanging from the side of his wheelchair. From it, he pulled out a worn photograph, its edges frayed, yet the image it held remained vivid. It was of a little girl, her radiant smile lighting up the frame. Her hair danced freely in the wind, and her bright eyes shimmered like the first rays of morning sunlight. Lifting the photo, John's voice cracked, his words spilling out like a dam that had held back a flood for years. "This is my daughter, Ellie. She was everything to me, until the war took away my chance to be with her." The entire diner fell into a stunned silence. Those who had been mere bystanders moments ago now couldn't take their eyes off John. His voice, rough and heavy with sorrow, continued, each word piercing the hearts of those listening. "I promised Ellie I would come home safely, but that was a promise I couldn't keep. When I returned, my legs were gone. And worse, so was Ellie. She passed away while I was trying to survive the battlefield." The masked man stared at John, his grip on the gun loosening as his shoulders sagged. His voice, for the first time, was fragile and faint, like a whisper carried by the wind. "I made promises to my daughter too, but I don't know how to keep them." John locked eyes with the man, his gaze filled with a profound empathy that seemed to reach the darkest corners of the man's shattered soul. Holding up the photograph, John's voice trembled but carried a resolute strength. "I couldn't be there for Ellie when she needed me most. But you can. Don't let your daughter lose her father. Don't let this pain become the legacy you leave her." The masked man froze in place, his breaths shallow and rapid, but his eyes were no longer consumed by despair. Something shifted within him, like a small ember reigniting from the ashes. Keanu Reeves, still standing nearby, spoke up. His voice was calm yet powerful, like a steady flame in a storm. "You're not alone. Don't let your mistakes define you or turn you into someone with nothing left to lose. There's another way, and we are here to help you find it." Keanu's words pierced through the darkness like a sudden beam of light. The masked man began to shake, not from fear, but from the overwhelming surge of emotion. Slowly, his hands lowered, and the gun slipped from his grasp, clattering onto the floor. Tears began to fall from the man's eyes. He sank to his knees, his voice breaking as the weight of his sorrow finally spilled out. "I just want my daughter to be proud of me. I just want to be someone she can look up to." John Harris nodded slowly, his eyes glistening with tears, yet his voice remained steady and resolute. "Then start here. Start by choosing the right path, right now." The diner door remained open, and a cold breeze swept through, carrying with it the promise of change. Standing in the doorway was a woman, her body trembling, her arms clutching a small bag tightly to her chest. She didn't step inside right away, as if afraid that moving forward might shatter the image before her. John Harris sat frozen in his wheelchair, his eyes wide, fixed on the woman. In that brief, suspended moment, all his pain, loss, and regret seemed to dissolve into the air. His voice, hoarse yet trembling with fragile hope, broke the silence. "Ellie, is that you?" The woman, Ellie, let out a choked sob. She set her bag on the floor and rushed toward John. Falling to her knees in front of him, she burst into tears, her voice breaking. "I heard people talking about a veteran at this diner. I couldn't believe it, but deep down I knew it had to be you. Dad, I'm so sorry. I was wrong to leave you." John bent forward, his trembling hands reaching up to cradle Ellie's face. His calloused fingers brushed gently through her soft hair, as if trying to confirm this wasn't a dream. His voice quivered, barely above a whisper. I thought I'd lost you forever. I searched for you, but I couldn't find you." Ellie looked up, tears streaming down her young yet weary face. She grasped her father's hands tightly, her voice shaking with regret. "I left because I was angry. I thought you didn't care about me, that you chose war over your family. But now I see. You lost everything. And I was so selfish." The atmosphere in the diner grew thick with emotion, suffocating in its intensity. The patrons who had witnessed the tense confrontation earlier now silently wiped away their tears. The story between father and daughter was no longer just about reunion. It was a lesson in love, forgiveness, and the deep misunderstandings that only time could heal. Keanu Reeves, standing nearby, quietly observed the scene. His eyes glistened with emotion. He stepped forward, and his warm, steady voice soothed the heavy air. "Sometimes, the darkest nights, the ones that seem like they'll drown us, are the very moments that lead us back to the people who matter most." Ellie turned to Keanu, her eyes widening in disbelief. You're Keanu Reeves? This can't be real." Keanu chuckled softly, his laugh breaking the somber mood. "I am. But tonight, I'm not an actor. I'm just someone lucky enough to witness something extraordinary." Ellie smiled through her tears, but her focus quickly returned to her father, as though afraid to waste another second apart from him. She gripped his hands tightly. "I'll never leave you again, Dad. Please, let's start over. Can we do that?" John didn't answer immediately. His eyes closed, holding back the tears threatening to fall. When he opened them again, they glimmered with a hope he hadn't felt in years. His voice wavered, but his words were resolute. "I'd like that. I've always wanted that." The air in the diner began to shift. The tension and heaviness melted away, replaced by a warmth that defied description, as though everyone there had journeyed through a long, dark night and emerged into the light. Ellie helped John from his corner. Max, ever faithful, stayed close by his side, glancing up occasionally to ensure his master was all right. The father and daughter walked slowly past the diners, who now gazed at them with newfound respect and admiration. At the door, Ellie turned back to Keanu, her voice trembling with gratitude. "If it weren't for you, tonight would have ended so differently. Thank you for being here. for seeing my father in a way his own daughter had forgotten. Keanu stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Ellie's shoulder. His eyes radiated genuine compassion as he replied, "I was just someone in the right place at the right time. But the courage, the love, the healing, that was all you and your father." John, standing beside her, struggled to hold back the tears welling in his eyes. His calloused hand reached out, gripping Keanu's firmly. Though his voice was thick with emotion, it was steady as he said, "You didn't just help me. You gave my family back to me. I can never thank you enough." Keanu simply smiled. He took a few steps back, raising a hand in farewell as he said, "Cherish what you've found tonight. Life can take so much from us, but if we don't give up, it also has a way of returning what matters most." As John and Ellie walked out the door, a gentle breeze swept through the October night. But for them, there was no chill. Max wagged his tail happily, keeping pace beside them. Father and daughter walked hand in hand under the soft glow of the streetlights. Back in the diner, Keanu turned to face the remaining patrons. His voice rang out, calm, but filled with purpose. "Tonight's meals are on me. And everyone, please, enjoy some dessert. Sometimes the sweetest moments come from the things we share." Applause rippled through the diner, not for the dessert, but because everyone recognized they had just witnessed something extraordinary. In that moment, no one in the diner was a stranger anymore. They were now connected by a shared memory that would stay with them forever. Keanu stepped outside, slipping his hands into the pockets of his hoodie. He looked up at the night sky, where a few scattered stars shone brighter than usual. A faint smile crossed his lips, as though he too had found some peace. As he walked along the quiet sidewalk, his footsteps blended with the city's rhythm. Yet in his heart, John's words echoed softly, "Don't let pain become the legacy we leave behind." A car passed by, its headlights casting a brief glow on the street. In that moment, the image of John and Ellie walking together appeared like a living painting, their smiles and tears intertwined in the light, leaving behind a gentle yet profound impression. Keanu's voice narrated softly, as if speaking to everyone watching. Even in the darkest nights, just a little kindness, a little love, can light the way. And sometimes, the most incredible miracles happen in the smallest, quietest moments of life.